Hi, this is Maggie, and I am recording this message for independent bookshops. I was hoping to be able to come and meet some of you, lots of you, next week and the week after and in the coming months, but the universe had other plans for us, so instead I am probably like most of you lot on lockdown at home. I'm actually hiding in the bedroom away from the rest of my family. So if you hear a lot of noise in the background, it's not that there's a riot breaking out. It's just my kids who've been at home away from school for a few days, as I'm sure most other kids in the country have. Also, the cat has just woken up. So if you can hear a bell, that's the cat, Selkie. She's decided to join in with this video. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about my cat and my children. I wanted to send this little message about my new book, which is called HAMNET, which I'm very happy with the cover. It's very beautiful, isn't it? Done with a liner cut. So I wrote this book about which centres around the pandemic of the Black Death, and I didn't really expect to be launching it in the middle of another pandemic. That was actually the last thing I expected, but then I guess the COVID crisis is the last thing we all expected. So it's a book I've wanted to write for a really long time. I first heard about the existence of HAMNET and the fact that Shakespeare had a son called HAMNET, which is basically the same name in parish records in Stratford. The two names are interchangeable in the 16th century, Hamnet and Hamlet. So I first heard that he had this son called Hamnet who had died at the age of 11 when I was studying the play Hamlet for my Scottish Highers when I was 16, and my teacher told us one day that Shakespeare had this boy and he died. And even then, even though I was only a teenager and quite some way off from being a parent myself, the symmetry of these names really struck me. And for a man who is so mysterious to us and so little is known about him in his actual life, Shakespeare, to call a play and probably his greatest tragic anti-hero after his dead son, to me seemed to speak volumes. It seems like an enormous sign somehow. I'm not quite sure what it is, but then there's so much about Shakespeare that is uncertain, that we aren't sure about. So to me it seemed like a very important artistic decision and a very big sign to his audience. So I've always been fascinated by this boy. And when I was at university, I studied literature and I read a lot of biographies and criticism about Shakespeare, obviously. And what always struck me actually is that Hamnet, the boy, is very overlooked and very underwritten. So I'd be reading these kind of massive 500-page biographies, and Hamnet might get, if he was lucky, 2 references in the back. Just his birth is mentioned and then his death is mentioned. And then the death was always followed by several paragraphs about infant mortality in Elizabethan times, which of course was very high. And the implication of which was that it wasn't really that big of a deal somehow because it was so common. And I don't know, it always seemed like a horrible presumption to make, that somehow, the death of this boy had not made an enormous impact on the family and on Shakespeare himself. It's no coincidence that his work is threaded through with boy and girl fraternal twins who are separated and then magically somehow reunited. And Twelfth Night, which of course features a pair of those twins, its opening night happened on the twins' birthday. And also, it's very far from nothing to call a play after your dead son. So I think I wrote the book wanting to give a voice and a presence to this much overlooked boy. I'm going to look at my notes and see what else I wanted to tell you. I've probably talked too much now about Shakespeare. I do have that habit, as my children will tell you. So I think I hugely enjoyed writing it. It involved a lot of research in libraries, obviously, but also a bit of practical research. So one of the people that I also feel has been really overlooked and actually really misinterpreted is Shakespeare's wife, who people generally call Anne Hathaway, but I found out, I read her father's will, for example, the year before she married Shakespeare, he died, and he left her a dowry, and he named her as Agnes. So I decided to give this name back to her, and she sort of took over the novel in a way. And I decided that for all the drama and brilliance and genius that was going on in London with Shakespeare and his career and his acting and his writing, I think I wanted to write about the presence of this enormous drama that was happening back in Stratford, the death of this child and the effect it all had on them. Anyway, I also wanted to say a massive and huge thank you to all independent booksellers. I love independent bookshops, and it's one of my greatest pleasures in life to browse and wander through them, and also ask the booksellers what they recommend. It's led to so many brilliant and inspiring reads for me. And for me, you know, I know that independent bookshops have stayed open as long as they can during this crisis, and I know that a lot of you are sending things out online or by, I don't know, Twitter or by email, by telephone order, and delivering them by bikes and skateboards and goodness knows what else. And I don't know, it's so heartening to hear, because I don't know about you, but for me, books would definitely be on an essential item list, and I consider booksellers as key workers myself. So just, I hope you all stay really safe,